Fisher's Island News here with Joseph Ibney. Mr. Ibney, can you tell me what office you're running for?
Yeah, I'm running for the governor's position on Fisher's Island right now.
Hey, can you tell me why you're running for this position?
Well, it's been quite a while since we've actually had a governor on Fisher's Island. I was originally the person who wanted to bring it back around 4 months ago before I made my departure for about a month and a half. Now that I'm back, I'm running for the position in order to establish several things, including such as constitutional law, salary increases for jobs and positions, taxes, as well as a couple of other things, including a people's newspaper.
Can you tell me what party you're running for?
I'm actually running for the People's. Excuse me for a sec. Sorry, I had a tongue twist there. The People's Justice and Action Party, also known as PJAP.
And what is that party all about?
It's a somewhat conservative party, more moderate than anything. We're looking to establish many of the things that we are desperately missing on the island, and including things that I mentioned before, such as constitutional law and stuff like that. But also,
What would you be adding to the constitutional laws?
well, right now the Constitution is less of a constitution and more of a. It's actually what is known as it's essentially a Bill of Rights. It guarantees the rights of man under the law. However, it doesn't outline how the actual government should be run, how legislative bodies should be run, how judicial bodies should be run, and how executive bodies should be run. So right now, because of that, we have the Department of Justice, which is the judicial body, creating the laws and enforcing the laws through the marshals, as well as ruling over those laws.
Are you going to be limiting
now
the power of the DOJ?
Yes, I will. I'm looking to limit the power of the DOJ. However, I've been working with the federal government with that for quite a long time now. So even if I'm not elected, it will most likely be coming into fruition.
Can you tell me, you mentioned taxes. What would you be adding a tax on?
So we're looking to add a low tax, about 6% to paychecks, and with that, we would be bringing back a government, essentially what is the government funds for jobs, which would include paying for salaries of employees by the government, as well as paying judges to have trials now, paying judges to do CCPs through that money, being able to construct roads, adding stuff like that, adding actual road signs to indicate the speed limits, essentially establishing taxes so we can actually bring forth changes that are much needed to the island, which have been affecting the island for quite some time now.
So basically, you're trying to create a big budget for the government by adding taxes where you can do stuff for the public.
I wouldn't say I'm trying to create a big budget. Again, we're going down to the lowest amount of taxes possible so that we can start bringing in money to get much needed changes to the island. However, I wouldn't say that this is going to be big budget.
What are some of those changes?
Like I said before, changes to how salaries are done, how equipment is bought.
How will you be changing equipment?
Essentially, we'll be putting in subsidies for members of all departments to ensure that they can at least have some money to buy their first round of equipment that they desperately need that won't be taken out of their paycheck. We'll also be looking into using the money to construct new roads that are desperately needed, or even, as I said before, add in road signs to indicate speed limits or other things that are desperately missing right now, as all we really have is a speed map, which is only indicated if you go look at it and go desperately searching.
Will you be adding any new jobs to the island?
Adding any new jobs? We're looking into a legislative body with the federal government right now, which would include not only members of the executive, which would include members of my cabinet, as well as other members which would be elected by the people in what is essentially a party amount of representation is given based off of the amount of votes you get. So if, let's say, I got 50% of the votes, or even 51% of the votes, I would go into office with my 5 ministers, and the other 49% would be elected officials would become elected officials as well. However, they would join the People's House, which would be a legislative body, which would essentially they would essentially run as the opposing party and what is the opposition in many forms of parliament in the world, in order to be a check on the executive branch. The legislative branch would obviously make the laws, executive would enforce the laws, judicial would review the laws. So what would happen would be you'd have around 13 people in the legislative branch, three being faction representatives from each of the three factions: DOJ, SD.
Now, will it be the
EMS.
faction leaders that will be these representatives, or will it be somebody else?
They won't be faction leaders. They'll be appointed by the faction leaders. So they'll have a say in regards to what they'll have a single vote into it in regards to that, as our factions are very important to the island. Then around 6 to 7 of the votes will be based off of representation, how many votes a party got in the election. So let's say there's 3 parties running. One party gets 40 votes. They get 40% of the ministers in the 7 that are delegated. Another party gets 20. They get 20% of the ministers. Another party gets, if I'm doing my math right, another 40. They would get another 40% of the ministers. And then the other 5 would be, the other 4 would be the members of my cabinet, and the other 2 members of the other 2 public representatives that are part of that cabinet. And the governor would act as essentially a what is known as the speaker, such as like in England. He would act as the speaker of the House. He doesn't get a vote, but he essentially directs how the actual proceedings will go.
Mr. Ibney, you talked about adding new laws to the Constitution. What would be some of those new laws?
It would be, it wouldn't be new laws per se. It would be more of creating a constitution, because right now the Constitution is just a Bill of Rights.
What would be in this Constitution?
It would essentially just outline how this whole government would work. It would give rules based off of how people are elected. It would give rules based off how public representatives are elected. It would give rules on how judicial members can be added. It would essentially establish what is a rule book to how the actual government should be run, as any constitution is. A constitution isn't just rules guaranteeing rights by law. It's actually a set of rules which show how a government should be run, what things should be done, and how it should be made, in essence.
Mr. Ibney, can you tell me if there's any parties running against you?
Yes, there is one party running against me right now, is one which isn't confirmed. The Fishers Island Anti-Oppression Party, I believe it's called, ran by Frank East.
And what are the members of your party?
Well, my members of my party are Chris Axel, excuse me. He's a FIFR member, and he's formerly been a part of the SD department as well as DOJ. And then Johnny Carver, who was originally my what is essentially the assistant district attorney now, and off island is studying for law in a law school. And then there's also the PR members, which are Frank. I'm sorry. I forgot his last name. Frank Spector. And then we're also looking into a 5th member now. We should have him by tonight.
Now, when is this election going to happen?
The feds haven't announced the exact date yet. It's going to happen sometime in July. However, I'm going to be hosting events sometime in between that to ensure that people know about what I'm campaigning for and what I'm looking to do. But hopefully it'll be at least a couple more weeks off, as we haven't had a chance to get any events going yet.
Okay, well, Mr. Ibney, thank you for this exclusive interview. I will probably have a follow-up interview in a few weeks. And a few weeks after that, and we'll check on how everything's going. So thank you.